Welcome to Nordic Talks Japan. My name is Reetta Purontakanen. I'm the press counsellor for the Finnish embassy in Tokyo. The Nordic Talks is not a monologue. It's a series of dialogues the Nordic countries are having with Japan. And in these dialogues, we talk about issues that derive from the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations. In the talks, we inspire to act and act to inspire, together with our 5 Nordic embassies in Japan, the Finnish Institute, the Nordic Innovation House, and our local partners. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to share a few short housekeeping items. Today's event is a hybrid event. We have all of you here in the room today, and we have our wonderful listeners online as well. And the event will last for about 90 minutes. We will have opening and closing remarks. The closing remarks will be delivered by the ambassador of Norway to Japan. And in between, I hope we will have a vigorous panel discussion and a town hall discussion about how to build startup ecosystems for a better world. Today's discussion here at Tokyo will be held in English, but online there is Japanese interpretation available. Please log into the Zoom event in today's Nordic Talks and select the language you would like to follow. And for those listening to us in Japanese, I have a short instruction which I have to read because it was a little bit technical. If you are listening to the Japanese interpretation, do not click on the mute original audio button under the language settings. During the town hall discussion, we have a consecutive interpreter on site, and while this consecutive interpretation is happening, the simultaneous interpretation will be on pause, and you will hear the on-site audio. So, do not tick on the mute original audio button. I think we got there a little bit technical. So, we are ready to start, and the Finnish ambassador Tanja Jääskeläinen is joining us a little bit later, so on her behalf I will deliver her opening remarks. The Nordic Talks are dialogues between some of the brightest minds in the Nordics and their counterparts around the world who are acting to make a change towards a better, more sustainable and more equal world. These are talks that happen all around the world, and here in Japan we've held these for 3 years, and this is in fact our 12th Nordic talk here in Tokyo. The challenges the world is facing, from imminent climate change to aging population, to name but a few, are asymmetrical and somewhat new. Therefore, we also need novel solutions that often governments and larger corporations can't deliver, or certainly at the pace we would need them. Enter the startups. Startups can address some of the most pressing challenges of our era through challenging the status quo with innovative solutions in an agile manner. The Nordic region is home to tens of unicorn startup companies and is a real breeding ground for innovative startups solving some of these toughest challenges of the world. This infrastructure is nurtured through student-driven initiatives, policymaking and city planning, this kind of failure-safe attitude where you can try and fail and try again without it being the end of the world. And of course, there are also governmental support schemes. Japan, on the other hand, has set forward a really ambitious goal to tenfold its number of unicorn companies and make Tokyo the most startup-friendly city in the world, words of the current Prime Minister. Investments into startups have been growing steadily, and new policies to encourage open innovation are being adapted. Across Japan, specific cities have also taken up the challenge and been nominated as startup cities. And Japan's business lobby Keidanren has a task force to enforce policies to build thriving startup ecosystems. We believe that the Nordic startup infrastructure know-how and the Japanese ambition are a match made in heaven. It's a cliche, but it's true. This Nordic talk focuses on how to build the infrastructure for inclusive startup ecosystem that produces novel and sustainable solutions, while fostering flexible ways of working, well-being, and a failure-safe culture. Without, of course, forgetting equality, so that absolutely everyone's ideas and good innovations can be brought forward in a safe environment. The speakers will also discuss what is the role of the younger generation in this infrastructure and what conditions can really nurture that ever-elusive quality innovation. So before I pass the microphone over to Niklas, I want to thank you, our brilliant speakers who are representing different sides of this equation. Amina Sugimoto, CEO, Fermata. Antti Sonninen, CEO, Takeoff Tokyo. Shintaro Ishida, COO, Urchinomics. And Tobias Mathiasen, founding partner, SKB Venture Capital. And also a sincere thank you to Niklas, who's been not only our moderator in this event, but our solid partner throughout the whole series. And of course, thank you to Moon Creative Lab, who have offered us this wonderful space for our event today. So, Niklas, without any further pressure, the floor is yours. Make it great.
All right, thank you very much, Reetta, for your opening words. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. I am super thrilled to be moderating this panel here. My name is Niklas Karvonen. I'm Community Director at Nordic Innovation House in Tokyo. We are a joint operation with the Nordic trade promotion organizations to support startups and tech companies from the Nordic region to come to Japan. I think this is a very timely discussion for issues Reetta already mentioned. I think just yesterday at the London Tech Week, there was the new startup ecosystem report by Genome, and it ranked Japan as 10th, so it come up 5 more spots, which is really, really ambitious. And we just celebrated the Sushi Tech Tokyo event a few weeks ago, where tens of thousands of innovators around the world came to Japan. And as was mentioned in the Nordics, I would say we have around 15 years plus of experience in building startup ecosystems, around 80 unicorn companies, which is per capita one of the highest in the world, just after Silicon Valley. And if we look at topics such as, for example, impact investments, it's around double the size of VC fund that we receive in the Nordic region. So the topic of sustainability SDGs are very close to our region. So without any further ado, I would like to have our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. So if you can just let us know your name, your organization, a little bit about which side of the startup ecosystem do you represent, and we'll take the panel from there. But Antti, go ahead.
Hello everyone, my name is Antti. I'm originally from Finland. I've been in Japan around 10 years, and I first brought this game called Angry Birds to Japan, which is a Finnish game. After that, I've been working in the startup industry in various projects. Before Corona, I used to organize this startup conference called Slush Tokyo. And I've also, on a freelance, on a smaller scale basis, brought some other foreign startups here, and also worked with a few Japanese startups, taking them overseas. My main project recently is Takeoff Tokyo, which we started last spring. We're putting Tokyo on the world map of startups, and yeah, I guess I'll have lots of time to go into all the details of that later today. So thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Antti. If you forget the organization, it's written right there on the shirt. Tobias, go ahead.
Thank you for the intro, for the invitation. My name is Tobias. I was born in Sweden. I have a Swedish grandma and a Danish grandpa, so I'm doubly honored to be here today. They're smiling down upon me, very proud, I'm sure. I spent the last 13 years sort of at the intersection of startups and early stage financing, starting with a high school startup 13, 14 years ago. That journey then took me to Hong Kong, to Dublin's tech ecosystem, then back to Hong Kong's tech ecosystem, to Switzerland's tech ecosystem, and then the last 5 years I've been working at a Swedish-Swiss early stage investor called Catalysen Ventures. And about 2 years ago, we decided that we wanted to do something more. We wanted to deploy our early stage experience in a new ecosystem where it could be put to good use. And I thought that Japan might be such an ecosystem. So the last 6 months or so, I've been spending a majority of my time here in Japan working on the launch of SKB.vc, which is a seed stage VC fund. We're putting our center of gravity at the moment in Kansai with a focus on tech to deep tech. So I hope to share with you some of those, say, insights or experiences I've had coming in as an outsider, studying the local ecosystem over the last 2 years.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And in the Nordic and startup-y manner, I will be sticking to first names here today. So Amina, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amina, and I guess we have to share where we're from. So my father is Malaysian, my mom is Japanese. I grew up in East Africa. I actually did study in Europe, so I have visited Nordic country and did also study in Norway for a little bit. My background in training is in public health and health economics. So I was in academia for a long time. But about 7 years ago, just before COVID, I came back to Japan and I joined a venture capital community for a bit. And then I realized so much of gender diversity is missing in this part of the world, very different from where I grew up. So before, when I was in academia, my focus on access to medicine. So how can we deliver, provide access to medical product to those who need it the most at the right timing. And I came across this new emerging market globally called Femtech, which basically applies the latest technology to women's health. And I thought, why don't I just bring Femtech movement in Japan and provide access to Femtech product in this part of the world? So I founded a company called Fermata about 5 years ago. We don't have our own products or services. What we do is we basically try to be a bridge between Femtech founders, entrepreneurs, and basically become a bridge to access points for products and services here in Japan. So that's what I do.
Thank you very much. Look forward to hearing more about that. And then we have Shintaro as well.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Shintaro Ishida from Urchinomics, Japan, or Urchinomics in Japanese. Well, I'm from Japan, purely Japanese, Junjapa. But I grew up in the US during my elementary school ages, and then in Belgium from my secondary to high school ages. But from college onwards, I've been always in Japan. My first career was in Sumitomo Corporation, where I was dealing with a lot of M&As, setting up new companies, new businesses, and PMI activities, and taking care of all those companies I bought or created. And then I did pretty much the same thing. I moved to Ajinomoto, where I was purchasing and doing PMI activities of overseas food manufacturers. But then during my ages in Ajinomoto, I found out my current company, Urchinomics, on LinkedIn. And because it's a company ranching sea urchins on land, and it said that by doing that activities, we're regenerating the environment at the same time. And I saw this, and I just had to call the founder who posted this article. And then that was in 2018. So I was helping the company out behind the table, kind of, as a volunteer. But then in 2021, when we were becoming commercial, I was called upon, and then onwards, I joined Urchinomics, which was personally a big leap from changing from a large company to a startup. So here, yeah, I would be probably talking about from the side of startups and maybe from the point of view of the larger companies in Japan. So yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your introductions. As you can see and hear, we have quite a mixed bunch of different parts of the ecosystems represented. So from here, we'll do a bit of deep diving into your stories and experiences, and I hope we can kind of take the conversation on a general level from there. Yeah, we can really see the power of LinkedIn, so that's good. But Antti, maybe if I can start with you again. Can you tell us a little bit more about? So you mentioned a bit about this Takeoff Tokyo, and it's an event that we celebrated just a few months ago. But what was your ambition behind? Why do you think this type of event is needed, and what's kind of your goal with Takeoff Tokyo?
So for me, it comes down to two things. I like Tokyo, but I also like ambition and ambitious projects. My first job after graduation at the Angry Birds company, I felt a lot of that, and I wanted to increase the number of ambitious startups in this region. And yeah, we're doing it through an event because it's a lot easier to show, build new culture through an event. I feel like an event is like a short prototype of what culture could be in the long term. So how we're doing it, we're organizing the contents mostly in English, and basically that gives ambitious founders to aim for #1 level projects instead of #1 globally instead of, for example, #1 only in Japan. And yeah, we're building this positive movement and community around that #1 in the world thinking.
Yeah, thank you. I think you already mentioned some interesting keywords, culture and ambition. I think hopefully we can touch upon those as well. And you mentioned a bit about your history with Slush Tokyo as well. I think it's been quite a few years after that event. What I always found very inspiring at these initiatives is that you have hundreds of volunteers who are running the engines behind the scenes, mainly younger students. So I'm curious to ask, why do these students and young folks join your movement? What's kind of their reason to do it? And since it's been quite a few years after, for example, Slush Tokyo, has there been, how are these volunteers still involved with the startup ecosystem? Have you seen any transitions there?
I mean, if you give a young person a lot of responsibility and freedom to execute, they might make some mistakes, but you might also end up creating very ambitious people in the process. So I think you talked about, for example, the startup genome ranking. I think recently, if you look at the Japanese startup ecosystem, like all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. There seems to be a lot of VC funding available. There seems to be a lot of government support. The only thing that we need now is really big thinking and like people who actually do it. It's kind of, if we think like a baseball team or a soccer team, it's like we have a great stadium, we have like several excellent coaches, we just need lots of amazing players. So kind of in Japan there's a famous baseball player called Shohei Ohtani, so like more Shohei Ohtanis of startups is what is needed now. So that's what we're focusing on, and that comes also from the volunteers.
Yeah, thank you very much. I can totally agree on kind of the movement and the timing, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this particular event here in Tokyo with this theme, because it does seem like a lot of the pieces of the puzzle are moving towards a common goal. So it's quite exciting actually to be in Japan in this ecosystem at the moment. I think, Tobias, you're also looking for these new Ohtanis in Japan with your new fund, SKB. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your ambition with SKB is and why now and why are you doing this in Japan?
Sure. I just think it's very funny you mentioned Ohtani. few years ago, there was an initiative to launch a new VC in Kansai, which sadly failed. But that initiative, their whole pitch was based on Japanese sports stars. And the basic premise that, look, we can be the best in the world at all of these sports. Why can't we be the best in the world at startups and innovation? And I really think Japan has that potential, and that is why I'm here. I think Japan's problem is not really startups. I'd say it's rather start downs and building bridges. So let me elaborate a little bit. My real dream job is actually to be a gardener, but you have to make money. So I thought early stage investor is, it's actually a lot of similarities. You need to make a good plan, you need to find the right tools, then you need to get your hands really dirty, and then you have to be patient, stand back, and offer the right amount of support to make sure that this garden actually takes off. And I think, again, that Japan has world-class innovation soil. And one attribute that I feel is shared between the Nordics and Japan, and that I'm very proud to share with Japan, is this culture of craftsmanship. I feel that both in the Nordics and in Japan, people are very proud to build things that work, to build things that are good, of a certain quality. Maybe people are terrified of the moment that a bad product is discovered to be bad. For whatever reason, I've found that the innovation quality here in Japan is hard to match. So the soil is really fantastic. But if we want a good ecosystem, what I see is missing is really more seeds. That is ventures, ideas being captured in a startup form, and gardeners, early stage investors who take care of all of these seeds. And I think there are two main ways to go about creating more seeds and more gardeners, and it relates to sort of why I'm here. The first one relates to, I mentioned, I think startups is not the problem is start downs. So Japan has, I believe, the second lowest rate of company deaths in the industrialized world. So there are very, very few companies that die in Japan compared to a lot of other modern industrial countries. And that might sound like a good thing. But if you also keep in mind that Japan is a market that's not growing that fast at the moment, it's largely a zero-sum ecosystem. So if old companies built on approaches that worked 100 years ago cannot die, there are not that many resources, capital, talent, knowledge to be deployed in new ventures, in startups. Because actually I see lots of great ideas. And yes, there are more and more investors, but they're still struggling to find, they're starting to find the money, but finding the right talent, I think, has been, a problem for quite a long time. So the first thing I think we need to enable is to let more old ventures die a graceful death. Now that, I'd say, thankfully rests maybe mostly with the government, but we can help ease that transition by creating good startup leads, good ideas for the old economy to be redeployed into. The second approach relates to growing the pie. And this is actually where I think investors like myself, and I'd like to inspire more investors to come to Japan, can make a difference. So last year, I believe, around 1.5% of global venture capital was invested in Japan. And I know, based on the amazing founders in innovation that I find, that Japan could support a lot more venture capital. There are enough good ideas to support that. But then you need to build bridges. And I think Japanese startups struggle to talk to international investors, largely because they don't have the experience. How do you talk to an international investor? What would they like to see? I like to say that Japan is brewing world-class innovation tea, but serving it in the wrong teacup if you want an American investor to take a sip or a European investor to take a sip. And that's where an international team, someone with, say, my own experience from investing in Europe and in Hong Kong, can team up with local talents, local investors, to create a new type of early stage investor. One that says, together we're going to build companies that can raise money from non-Japanese investors and grow that pie. So that's sort of a long road to why, what I'm doing, trying to launch a seed stage fund, and why. Because the ideas are amazing. Last thing, Japan has this long history of adopting and adjusting to environmental challenges, lack of natural resources. There's so much knowledge here which is becoming more and more relevant outside of Japan, for every day that passes. So even as a Swede, I feel it's selfishly good to help Japanese innovation rise, because there are many climate ideas here, climate tech ideas, which we want to focus on, that could be deployed in Europe or the US or elsewhere. Sorry for the long monologue.
No, thank you. I'm writing down your anecdotes. They're so wonderful. I love this gardener example that you also gave, and this start downs. And I think sometimes I'm hearing this startup composting idea that actually we need to let them down. They become this soil for the new startup. So maybe you have become a gardener in that sense. One more follow-up for you, Tobias. Every time I see you, you're all around Japan. I think we met at the Hokkaido Innovation Week, and last week when you have a call, I think you were in Kansai, and you mentioned SKB is more of a Kansai-based initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's outside of Tokyo, and why should we also be interested in that?
So something I realized rather quickly was that, again, the main way I can contribute is by building bridges. But then we need to find ideas and startups that foreign investors would also be interested in. And software has a tendency to be very localized, very specialized to domestic preferences, cultures and such. I think it's a somewhat tricky challenge to get American investors to put in a lot of money into Japanese software. And the moment I decided we need to focus on tech and deep tech, because tech and deep tech follows the laws of biology, chemistry, physics. Those are the same natural laws across the whole planet. That moment, I also felt that I could afford to look outside of Tokyo. And the natural place to go, I felt, was Kansai. The Kansai Innovation Triangle, as I like to call it. You have Osaka, Kobe, Kyoto. Kyoto, I believe, is home to 9 Nobel Prizes. Kansai prides itself on a culture of being a little bit more crazy, thinking outside of the box as opposed to inside of the box, made evident by those Nobel Prizes. I just think the Kansai culture lends itself very well to establishing a startup ecosystem. And maybe lastly, a very pragmatic reason, there is a brain drain going on in Japan between Tokyo and the rest of the country. And sure, Tokyo, this is great for Tokyo, but the rest of Japan might not want Tokyo to be the #1 startup city in the world. They might want some of that glory spread across the country. So when I talk to Osaka Prefecture and say, I want to set up this fund, they say, this is a must-have for us. How can we help? Can we partner up? When I have the same conversation in Tokyo, you're treated more as a nice-to-have. Again, Tokyo is somewhat comfortable with the status quo. Kansai less so. So when you're new somewhere, you need to have really good partners and friends. So being able to work with someone such as Osaka Prefecture gives you that added level of credibility to get started. So there are pragmatic reasons for looking outside of Tokyo if you're new to Japan. And I think there's some long-term strategic reasons with great ideas across the country.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a friendly competition, hopefully, and it's driving for both ecosystems
I agree.
to grow.
But the competition aspect is very important.
Right. All right, thank you. Then I would like to focus on you, Amina. I saw you at the Sushi Tech event a few weeks ago. You were on stage and I was like, okay, this is the person that we need in this panel. So I hijacked you after your presentation and I'm so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Fermata and what your ambition with that is?
Yeah, so as I said, I started this company called Fermata, focusing on women's health and tech, but more so on healthcare, health tech field, but an area that people don't really necessarily want to talk about, but they're hidden needs, just simply because people don't culturally, religious behind all the reasons, people simply don't want to talk about. Hence, that idea is not translated into a sentence, put into a question, share with entrepreneur, share with investor, hence there's no products being born. So we've been focused on the latent needs healthcare area, and we're just using women's health as an example, simply because I'm one of them. So I simply I first came back to Japan about 7 years ago, and I was working at the VC, and there's a growing movement around female health and tech around the world, and there was a huge case startups to be invested in. It was like it was on a DD profile, and we were in a meeting. And at the meeting table, I was the only female there, and there were a few products that I was like, I could be a potential customer for this, and I want it. And no one even looked at it, and it was just put it on it didn't go through the DD meetings. And I was just questioning myself, like, why is that? If the majority of people who's making financial decision, how much money goes into what product and what service, and if half the population's need were not considered, that's not actually a good investment. So I kind of started looking into, like, why is that the case? And so what I've been doing at Fermata is primarily just like really helping to create or like cultivate femtech industry in Japan and Asia. One way of doing that is actually we have a network with over 2,000 companies, femtech companies for all around the world, including Nordic companies. We help them bring the product into Japan and also get that product being invested by the Japanese VCs, get them interested by the Japanese big multinational companies, and let them understand that there's a huge market here and that is happening outside of the world, and we should equally have the same amount of market. But the reason why they're not seeing it or doesn't exist now is that all the decision making just been happening from one angle and not basically being blind to the need of the other half of the population. So as I said, we don't have a single product on our own, but we're trying to sort of like be the cultivator, platformer, trying to help the dialogue that happen between investors, startups, big companies, politicians, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think it's really revolutionary. You're bringing this whole new industry into Japan, which I imagine has not been the easiest of rides. So I would be curious to hear a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur in Japan, some of the challenges you faced, and also the support systems. What has been useful to you, or what do you wish you had when you started Fermata in Japan?
Honestly, I grew up outside of Japan and in global environment. And if I hadn't known how difficult it is to work on women's health in Japan, I don't think I would have started it.
Thanks for coming.
No, I don't recommend. When I first started doing femtech events in Japan, which was 5 years ago, the first few events, about 90% of those who came were men, and they thought it's a fintech event. And when I started explaining about femtech, and they were like, what? Women's health? What period? And when I go around investment for like fundraising for other companies as well as for my company, 95% of the time who sits on the table with me and the other counterparts were all men. And it's not men's fault. I'm not blaming you all. Simply, but when I just mentioned vagina or all these terms, terminology that should be okay to talk about, their face go cold. And then at that point, people stop listening to us. And that was the reality about 5 years ago. And then now, I think slowly people start to realize that, it's a global movement. If it's something happening in Nordic, it's something up in New York, it must be something trendy. And I guess the femtech term itself now became relatively sort of well-known. But the problem in Japan now is that the innovation around women's health, actual services in tech is not yet to arrive. It's happening a lot in health tech advanced countries, but not here. It's not just VC problems. Regulation-wise, a huge hurdle. This is a country that it only took 3 months to approve Viagra, but 30 years to approve pill. So regulation-wise, the system is also being built and designed from one angle and not the other. There are a few devices, for example, that we put inside vagina and take, for example, vaginal fluid data, so we can now monitor ovulations and fertile window months to come, so there's technology like that. When we first tried to bring that to Japan, I had to have a license to sell sex toys, and also the same license could, I forgot the term. It's the same license that I could have brothel or something. Because it's considered the sex industry. So I had to, so I had to go to the police station to get that license. And the policeman used to ask, so what kind of girls do you have? And I'm like, yeah, so we had that a lot in the first couple years, the real stories, but then it started to change, and even the VC world, Sushi Tech also invited us to speak. So gradually, the importance of women's health and including female in the VC community is increasing. But yeah, so in 5 years, Japan changed a lot.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing. Those are also quite interesting anecdotes, and comes to show that, you know, the whole ecosystem has to come together when we're talking about these new industries, whether it's regulators and even these licenses that you wouldn't even think of might actually pop up. So thanks for sharing, and it's really interesting to hear about your journey. But let me move on to Shintaro. Sorry for taking a time to get to you. CEO of Urchinomics. Can you tell us a little bit about what the mission of Urchinomics is and the problem that you're solving?
Yes, so yes, as I told you, we are ranching sea urchins on land, but the purpose of doing that is because now we are seeing a lot of, due to climate change and other factors, we're seeing a lot of sea urchins overgrazing in the seabeds, eating up the kelp forests, which is which is an essential part of our marine bio ecosystem. It's really the bottom part of the pyramid where small fishes lay eggs on, which the small fishes eat on, and also it's more and more we know that there's a lot of CO2 sequestration effect by those, but so the sea urchins, because they're overgrazing, they're eating up these kelp forests, and causing desertification of the seabeds, which we're called, and so where you see only urchins and nothing else, really, virtually something like that, which we call in Japanese isoyake, or burnt sea surfaces. The urchins at those areas, because they're starving, they don't have any gonads in them where we can eat. So it's really left on the seashore, seafloor, without anyone taking them, nor predators eating them. So we have divers go in, catch those specific sea urchins, and then we purchase them actually, and then ranch them on land with the technology originally developed by the Norwegian National Institute, and well, yes, we have developed that further in Japan, creating. But yes, so we're ranching them on land. And then feeding in a very controlled environment with the feed that we developed, and ranching them for from around 8 weeks to 12 weeks, and turn them into gourmet seafood, which is very much favored in Japan, of course. So we're creating urchins that we say that as much as you eat, you're restoring the environment. That's what we're doing, yes, in Japan. And we're also, so we have 2 commercial plants in Japan, and then we have experimental facilities now in Canada, US, New Zealand, and Norway. And so we're looking forward to commercializing in those countries also.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really inspiring technology, and obviously these commercial sites and the projects that you're working with, I mean, they're huge in scale, with a lot of different stakeholders and ecosystem players involved. And you're working with, for example, companies like Eneos and Hokkaido Electric here in Japan. So I'm really curious to also hear about the cooperation between large corporates and startups. So if you can tell from your experience here in Japan, why do the big ones collaborate with startups? What are they interested in, and how has that collaboration been for you?
So I'm sure, yeah, other people would be able to speak more on this, but the large corporations are looking to create places to invest in and create more innovation. Whereas which they cannot create by themselves. So there are lots and lots of places where we are invited to, where we can socialize at, like maybe here also, and other companies are doing. creating spaces like this. But then also larger corporations, they are, I hear that in Japan, many of them are now feeling pressure from their investors or other stakeholders for doing CSR activities within their businesses. And also our investors, like the ones you mentioned, ENEOS and Hokkaido Electric, they are in actual needs to offset their carbon emissions. So in that sense, they were looking for companies like us, so like ENEOS, instead of course, it's the largest energy company in Japan, and because their emission is huge, and so instead of just purchasing credits by their profits, they decided that they would like to invest in companies who would be able to create those credits and then help offset the emissions from their activities. So they have been very generous in really research and also proving what we are saying is real. So they have been very generous in helping us out with certification of blue carbon credits, which we obtained 2 years ago. And also Hokkaido Electric, of course, they have huge emissions also, but they're also looking at really returning things to their local communities. So, and of course, Hokkaido, it's the place for sea urchins. So they have really called upon us and volunteered to really help us out in finding the new site, and not only volunteering, but probably after locating a good site, then they would probably invest in that local site also. So large companies are really looking for opportunities and also places where they can tell there's places for CSR activities. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like there is kind of a financial initiative pressure from the investors, legislative sides in meeting up with the CSR needs, but then also maybe looking at it from this needs to offset perspective and actually can you make some business out of it that could be sustainable as well. Some of these sites you mentioned, Hokkaido, for example, I'm sure they must also involve the local community. So we're talking about cities and municipalities, maybe even mayors. Maybe if you can just elaborate a bit on that. How do you engage with the local communities at these sites, and who are kind of the key opinion players, and what's everyone's motivations to be involved?
Okay, yes, there are various key opinion players actually, and it's very hard for foreign companies to just go there and approach these people. That's especially people like fishers or divers. For them, a foreign company is too remote, because even for them, a company from Tokyo is remote enough. So, and we're a company from Tokyo with katakana name, so we're still kind of remote. Maybe I should think of another name or brand, more Japanese, but still. So what we always have done is to locate a good partner or a key person who would be helping us or guiding us at local communities. First 2 sites we set up, we found a good partner at each places. One come from a fisher family who decided not to become a fisher once, but then because from seeing the sea really changing, and he decided to start oyster ranching, and then in the course of doing that, he found us and then volunteered to start from the test phase that we were doing back in 2016, I believe, or 17, yes. So, and then, yes, we decided to set up a site, commercial site with them. The first one was set up with this person in Oita. And then the second site we made was with a seafood processing company, which has been running for over 150 years from Meiji, or probably before Meiji. So this person had very networks of fishers and fishery cooperatives. So he was very efficient and smooth in finding new places where we can get those urchins from urchin barons. So that's, and of course he was able to really, all the locals pretty much knew him. And he knew pretty much all the locals, so that's so yes, they have been a very good guide for us. And also and from another perspective, so Chiho Sose, or revival of the countryside, maybe if I may. Has been on the national agenda for quite long in Japan, and all the local governments are, because of the decreasing population here, and also and which is more and more apparent in the countryside. So all the local governments are looking for new businesses which create new jobs, and by talking to them in that narrative of setting up a new site, getting new people come in, and also and then creating a new local specialty for them. All the local governments have been very much cooperative in supporting us in terms of subsidy and non-monetary support, including getting permits or finding good sites. Getting and all that activities leading to setting up companies and onwards also. Like in Oita, even the governor or the mayor, local mayor, has often purchased urchins from us and took those as souvenirs when he goes to many places. And they have been really cooperative in helping us go to new fishery cooperatives and such. So if you're able to really tell them in that perspective where we will be bringing new business, new people, and new jobs, and of course local specialties, then it probably would be easy to find good support from local governments and other authorities.
Yeah, thank you.
If you don't mind, this touches upon a stereotype that I'd like to challenge. And we did just earlier today that I think there is a stereotype that Japan is very, very difficult market to enter. But I've found that in Japan, there are sort of two ways forward, whereas in the rest of the world, there's usually only one. So those two ways are financial ways, financial track record, financial values, or strategic values, strategic pathways. Whenever I talk to investors outside of Japan, for instance, or decision makers, it's 95% of the conversation is about, what's your financial track record? Are you going to make my money grow? Whereas here in Japan, I'd say a majority of the conversation is focused on what strategic values can you deliver for me? Disregard the financial track record. What's your strategic value? I think part of the reason it's that way is because in a group where no one wants to take that much personal risk, people are more comfortable to make decisions based on strategic values, because strategic values might be apparent to the group as a whole, whereas financial risk takings, financial bets are more individual. And in hindsight, it's easier for someone to say, that was a poor investment decision. Why did you think it would be a good investment decision? And so I just find that as someone who does not have a financial track record in Japan, and my investor network in the Nordics is not that useful here in most conversations, but by taking the time to do that homework and really understand, be it a big corporation or a city or a prefecture, what strategic values are they looking to unlock? I feel it's actually easier to try to enter Japan than a lot of other markets that would only be looking at your financials. So I thought of that when I heard you speak. I don't know if you've had a similar experience or not.
No, thank you for the addition. And I think it's really impressive that you found these fishery families and these people who are rooting for you, whether it's all the way to the mayor. So I thought that was interesting to hear and really important to have those rooters for you, especially if you have a company with a katakana name. Then I would like to take the discussion more on the other part of today's panel, which is building startup ecosystems for a better world. So I would like for us to spend a few minutes discussing here, what is the role of startups in solving these large problems, challenges that we have in the world? Why cannot it be the large corporates? They have the money, they have the resources, networks, and logistics. Why do we need startups and people like yourselves to be challenging the status quo? Maybe if I can start with Amina, for example, since you shared such a good story.
Well, I guess it also really depends on the industry too, especially in the healthcare startup or health tech world. It really depends on the health systems of each country. So Japan is very much dependent on the national health coverage, universal health coverage, 30% out-of-pocket payment system, and people are sort of used to going to clinics all the times, and it's way cheaper to go to clinics than actually purchasing like a health tech product. So it's easier for big companies to invest and come up with medical device products for hospitals and clinic than a startup coming up with their own product. But I guess that's only for the mainstream healthcare. And I think especially, let's say, femtech is very important because it kind of shed lights on things that the big company perhaps wouldn't see, because they will make an investment and they have to get big return, and they kind of have to focus on the area they can see, right? The needs that is obvious to them. Whereas on the startups, we can operate more on a financially simpler manner, and it's more of a future investment that we're getting from the investors. So we can actually focus on things that may not be a big market yet, but soon to be. And so focusing on startups focusing on like the latent needs, the things that hasn't really seen as obvious needs within healthcare so we collaborate a lot with big companies in that way. After you actually have the product out in the market, then we don't obviously have a way to distribute the product. So obviously in the ecosystem, startups is important, but how can we actually deliver these products into the people who need it the most? In Japan, with the health system that we currently have, we kind of have to collaborate with the existing public system as well as the big companies. I don't know if I have answered your question, but yeah.
No, yeah, thank you. And of course, I think what you mentioned, the industry plays a big role, and who are your stakeholders in that industry, and how much flexibility and risk can what type of organizations take, and can startups kind of navigate their way through that maze is how I interpreted that. Tobias, do you have any additions to this as you are starting to look for the next big startups from Japan?
I'd like to take it back to the compost, the startup compost, and say I think startups are not a nice to have if you want to have an actual ecosystem with an actual cycle where over a 50-year period or 100-year period, it's actually good if some companies die when they no longer can reinvent themselves, and all that energy, knowledge, talent is redeployed in something. And those are startups. And I think it's worth remembering also that, I think it's only about 5% of startups who are actually VC funded. We tend to think startup equals companies that VCs talk to. That's just a small subset of startups. But those might be the startups that can take a little bit more risk for whatever reason, and that can create new tools that the other 95% of startups use to kind of form the backbone of the economy. And I think this is true in most economies, that it's not the 5% of VC startups that generate economic growth. It's when the other 95% deploy those new tools that are becoming available. So I just think startups are immensely important for this whole thing to work out. It's not a nice to have, and I think honestly Japan has kind of pushed that, is starting to feel some of that pain when you don't have that rebirth cycle. But again, the good thing is that those resources, that energy is still in the system. It's just a question of making it possible for it to be redeployed in new ideas, new teams, maybe more diverse teams. I think part of that, maybe last thing, is to make it easier for people to transition between jobs. My impression is that the government has outsourced some of these social responsibilities to very large companies, to make it more economically feasible, where private insurance and so on is often covered by your employer. So maybe Japan could look towards the Nordics and collaborate with the Nordics when it comes to finding that balance between enough social safety so that people can afford to sort of be unemployed for a while and then find a new job in the sort of earlier stages of the economy. I'm sure that's an area where we could collaborate a lot, and it's a 50-year project. So yeah, those are just some more thoughts on that topic.
Yep, thank you very much. Antti, any reflections on your side, the conversation so far and the ecosystem that you're building with Takeoff Tokyo, and where do you see the people graduating from this event, and how do you see the future of the startup ecosystems here in Japan?
We need more players. We have gardeners. We have lots of people helping around the sidelines. But the more players we can get, the more home runs and more success stories we can have. And the question about how do startups build society? If culture eats strategy for breakfast, if a startup can make it financially sustainable, there's probably something there that works in the long term. So yes, startups can make something very real. That's why we need them.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great that we are here at Moon Creative Lab, where we are creating these players, and we will hear a bit more later. Anything from you, Shintaro, before we move on to QA? How can startups save the world?
Well, that's a big topic. But
You're doing it. So.
well, I'm trying to do that, yes. Well, but I don't know about what the need for startups, especially here, touching on that aspect. I think because Japanese people are very conservative, especially my generation and someone close to me has been very, very conservative. All the people graduating from top university would go to large corporations, which probably would be safe until their retirement, and people from Tokyo University would pretty much go to become bureaucrats or choose large corporations. So I think, and of course, these people are still in the managers or decision makers of these large corporations. So it's probably, I'm sorry to many of the audiences, but it's probably to really create something very different or something innovating from a large corporation. So that's probably where more and more startups need to be come out from Japan, and that's where probably startups. That's where large corporations can really help the start. That's where large corporations. That's what large corporations should be doing more and more, helping those, because they can take, they of course can take risks, but they probably just cannot, there are many things that they just cannot do inside of themselves. So, so yes, does that kind of, maybe add to our discussion? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have an addition, Amina?
I just thought maybe I could add something on my. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So speaking of ecosystem, startup ecosystem, I often talk about this with my female entrepreneur friends, founders, and in Japan especially. How many of you have played Dragon Quest, Dorakue? Good. I mean, I haven't played, but my friends.
That was an interesting one.
Yes. So my friends and I talk about how, like, using Dragon Quest as an example. Apparently, it's a game that you go in as a player. You kind of have to find a villager, right, to get a hint to quest the game, to go to the next stage. Currently in Japan, what we feel is that in order to meet an investor, in order to meet an important person, in order to meet someone who can help us, as a female entrepreneur, we can't even meet the villagers. We're like outside of the village. And it seems like ecosystem is happening inside the village, but we're out. And I guess all the evidence has proven that the diverse team actually do well in startups. But unfortunately, quite a lot of us are being still is left out. I think it's been improving quite a lot in the last couple of years, but I think there's a lot that we can actually do to include people, not just female, but people not from here, different background, culturally, religiously, and I think a large chunk of that understanding is majorly lacking in the currently developing startup ecosystem in Japan.
Yeah, thank you very much. And not just in Japan, I think it's a global issue. And then we look at VC funding and what kind of founder teams that goes to. And we're not doing that much better in the Nordic countries either. If we look at VC money that goes into female-led startups or even mixed genders, perhaps a little bit higher than some of the other benchmark countries, even though the same reports show that the returns are usually better for female founders. So I think that for investors, this sounds like there is money on the table to be made. But
it's one of the reasons why I think now is an interesting time to enter. I mean, if I see 6 mega trends that lead to now is the right time to enter. The fact that I feel Japan has sort of been in a cage fight with one arm, tied behind their back. That hand is starting to get loose, and you have half of the population starting to think maybe I should build something, get involved in the, startup ecosystem. That's one of the reasons why I think, here's an opportunity that's soon to be released.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I think we can open the floor for a quick Q&A before we go into our town hall discussion. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand as we have a gentleman here in the middle. So if you can bring a mic. Please let us know who you are and if you would like to address your question to any of the panelists here.
Thank you for your informative and very hot discussion. I'm Kazuo Tsuka, coming from Tsukuba Science City. I belong to our deep tech startup incubator in the city. In Tsukuba City, our town, we have more than 20,000 scientists, and we have had more than 400 startups so far, but we only had 2 IPOs, so very few number of exited startups. So my question is that in my conversation with very serious discussion with many venture capitalists, we wonder how we can make very successful cases in our ecosystem. I think it is totally understandable to have many challenges, many startups, then we can increase the number of successful cases, whereas it could be another option to have a kind of a concentrated effort of supporters, because I wonder if it is very successful to make a good case only with distributing many resources, thin resource to every startup. Rather, it could be an option to support very strongly a certain startup. Then we may be able to create a good case. I'm wondering still, but I would like to have your comments on it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a really fascinating question, whether you would put all of your efforts into selected ones, or if there is a reason or a need to be supporting many different startups or initiatives at the same time. Any comments from our panel regarding this question?
I could start if you'd like. First of all, nice to meet you. One of my strategic partners is actually ATR of the Keihana Science City. So you are a brother or sister science city, so it's good to meet you. Honestly, I think there are, again, I come back to this figure that 1.5% of global venture capital was deployed in Japan last year. I think there are enough good ideas in Japan for that figure to be multiplied many times over. The problem as I see it is that a lot of Japanese, or why do I think a lot of Japanese startups have failed to raise money from global investors? Because this is a way to bring in increased demand for Japanese startups, raise the value of Japanese startups, enable larger exits, more success stories, the birth of new VCs and so on. I think domestic exit strategies is one very, very big reason. Most Japanese startups that you meet have built their company around a domestic exit strategy, such as a Tokyo IPO. And this is a very, very quick way to lose the interest of foreign investors. Now, I don't think it's the startup or founder's fault. I think they are just listening to what most Japanese VCs are asking for. And I used to blame Japanese VCs and say, you need to ask for more. You need to put more pressure on these founders. But then I realized that actually, I think it's the VCs investors who is, also part of this challenge, the LPs. LPs in Japan, again, I think more often than not, they invest for strategic reasons. So the financial returns are secondary to the strategic reasons for investing, meaning that if they get their money back, it's okay. They might support your next fund. If you double their money, they're probably thrilled. So the LP is telling the VC, if you can climb Mount Fuji, we're happy, you can keep your job, we'll support your next fund. And then the VC will implement the strategy that gets you to Mount Fuji, not the strategy that gets you to Mount Everest. So they're finding a way to maybe aim for 2-3x returns, domestic exit strategies, not take some risk, go for the 10x, but maybe you'll lose all of the money. So I think we need to also change the way that the LPs are thinking. One way of doing that, I hope, is that by implementing global strategies ourselves, we can show them what's possible with Japanese innovation. That Japanese innovation can deliver 10x returns. And then maybe we can get also the domestic investor thinking to be more risk willing. But I think Japanese innovation could, there is enough capital out there. There are enough good ideas here and enough capital out there in the world for both to meet.
All right, thank you. I think we can take one more question before we have to move on. Hard to pick. Antti, pick one for me. All right, so then we have the guy in the blue shirt.
The guy in the blue shirt. Thank you. I have a question to Shintaro. And the question is, are you sure that Japanese people are not taking risks? You mentioned this somehow. And there are these mantras, and if you repeat mantras many, many times, they don't become true. And I will give you 2 examples of where big Japanese corporations have taken enormous risks. And one is Toshiba, which acquired Westinghouse in US without any due diligence at all. They thought that thought that Westinghouse has a know-how to build nuclear power stations, which by the time Toshiba acquired, it was long gone. And Tobias said that Japanese large corporations don't go under. And as a function of that risk taking of buying Westinghouse without understanding what they were buying, Toshiba actually more or less went under. I mean, in the corporate way, they got taken over by private equity. I can give you another example where another famous Japanese company took an enormous risk, which is Sharp. They didn't know the difference between a bank loan and equity. So they built a big factory in Sakai, which is making headlines again last few days, to build these large liquid crystal panels, because Sharp thought that everybody will buy bigger and bigger TVs, which wasn't the case. But now, so Sharp also went under, Japanese corporations go under. They were acquired by Hunhai, which in American is usually called, I forgot. And now the SoftBank is going in there with an A plan. So can I challenge you to review your opinion that Japanese large corporations don't take risks? And can I challenge Tobias to
I think I'm sorry for the interest of time. Let's just stick to this risk question because, as you mentioned, it's something we hear a lot, and even I have many opinions on this. But Shintaro, why don't you answer this question?
Very tough question, and I may have to take back my word. Yes, that is true. And yes, actually, the person who was a part of due diligence in Toshiba and was in PMI activity, I know the person, so it's very difficult to speak of that. But yes, so well, yes, of course, they sometimes they have taken risks. They have taken very big risks, of course, in sometimes. But generally speaking, generally speaking, I believe so. Well, one of the problems about that, and also about what I thought would, from my side, is thinking that Japanese corporations tend to be conservative, is probably because of the decision-making process of Japan. Still a seniority system is apparent in many companies, which pretty makes changes very difficult. But on the other hand, when someone at the top says to do something, then such kind of they may take very big risks. So it's, well, yes, so there are many cases, but I think in general, it's very difficult for younger generation or people to make changes, which has not been many imaginable to the older generations. That may be the problem. One another example that I can tell you is that I joined Urchinomics in 2021 when I was 44, age 44. And so that was a big switch from a large company to a startup. I'm pretty sure that probably more than half my friends, or maybe 75% of my friends, thought that I made a very stupid choice, leaving a very big company where I would be able to get good care, social security, pension, and all that. So I think in general there are still that kind of mentality. Yes.
Well, and I agree. Everything is relative, I think. But I think to your point, Gerhard, such mantras are dangerous. I often hear people say, "Oh, Japan is not a very entrepreneurial culture," which I think is completely false. And if you look towards history, there's an immense amount of household innovation that originates in Japan. So the potential is in there, and we just need to, I think, release more of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a really important topic to be brought. I was hoping for that it would pop up. But for the remaining time, I would like to move on to our town hall discussion. So we have a few members here that we have asked to extra carefully follow today's discussion and share their thoughts, opinions, and reflections, and ask any additional questions that they might have. I think I also saw Komura-san in the audience. So if you want to take a green or a gray seat from the front. But let me start with Ms. Yuki Obata, who is a Mitsui 2nd D, currently participating here at Moon Creative Lab. So if you can tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're working on, and what were your takeaways from today, and if you have any additional questions. And please do stand up so we can also see you. Thank you.
Hi, yes. Is this on? Yeah. Hi, my name is Yuki, and I am a 2nd D at Moon Creative Lab, currently working on a company called Isho. Our mission is to make sure no work is unnoticed in a workplace. And yes, so I've been seconded for like a year now. And yes, and to just show my background, I was born in the UK and I grew up in Russia, Australia, and the US, but my passport's Japanese. And I think some takeaways I had is that it's great to kind of have all these events as well to see Japan be more innovative, really open to new challengers or people that want to try out new things. Because I think there's a cultural aspect in Japan that is very prone to change. And I think it was great to hear that you guys want to have more people that are willing to take more challenges and so on. A question I may have is, sorry, I didn't know I had to ask a question until now. Was, how do you, in 10 years from now on, how do you see like Tokyo looking like? How do you want to see the ecosystem look like in Tokyo in 10 years?
That's a perfect question. Antti, why don't you go first? You're nurturing the next generation on this. What do you hope for example, your volunteers to achieve here?
So there's $10 trillion companies in the world. 9 of them are in the US, 1 is in Saudi Arabia. We could have a few of them here. In 10 years, there might be even more than 10 in the world. But yeah, leading companies in the world is what I'm personally working on seeing here in Tokyo. Yeah.
If I can only pick one thing to make it simple, I'd say when I meet the founder, I'd like them to start with their global vision mapped towards, say, a global exit strategy down the road, rather than, sort of, local IPO, Tokyo IPO. So if just that people have the confidence to dream a little bit bigger for their world-class ideas.
Well, because I work in the countryside a lot, so I would like to speak not only of Tokyo, but maybe for whole of Japan. So Japan used to be, in the Edo period, we had all the Hans. They used to be really, their economy was running on their own. Everything was created within that small state. All the garbage was taken care of in this state, and then there were all kinds of food cultures and sake brewers and everything. So it was a very diverse. I believe that the culture it had a very diverse and diverse culture in Japan. But now we're seeing those deteriorating. So by us helping out the primary industry, I would like to see more and more of that diversity to hold on and maybe flourish, especially because more and more tourists are coming into Japan. That kind of Japan with more diverse cultural diversity, I would like to see in 10 years.
Thank you.
So
Amina.
the question was how
How would you like to see 10
Tokyo
years Tokyo startup ecosystem, femtech industry, whatever viewpoint you want to?
Well, maybe just not the Tokyo ecosystem or femtech industry overall, but I want to see Japan to become a place where having a kid becomes a choice and not a responsibility or a burden on women. 750,000 babies were born last year, and in about 10 years' time, it's a matter of time that the number of babies being born in this country becomes less than 500,000 a year. And now the government sort of try to come up with policies, and the workforce too, the companies, trying to figure out how can we get these women and young people to get married and to have a kid. And I wonder, do we have to get married to have a kid? Just like in Nordic country or elsewhere, if we could have a choice of being a single father, same-sex marriage, not even married couple having kids, if we give them options, they will just choose that options and have babies. Even like IVF technologies, if we just allow sperm donation, which is very gray area in Japan. So I hope that maybe challenging with the current government, but for not just women, but everyone to have a kid to become a choice and not the responsibility.
Thank you very much for your comment, and thank you very much, Yuki. We have also a member from Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Mr. Ryusuke Nishi from the Innovation and Industry University Collaboration Division. If you can share your reflections and if you have any additional comments, and I think we have interpreter available as well.
はじめまして、経済産業省の西と申します。お招きいただいてありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Nishi from Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry.
私からは日本および経済産業省のスタートアップの取り組みと、そして私の業務、あと最後ご質問という形でお話しできればと思っております。
From my side, I'd like to briefly talk about startup-related situations in Japan and what kind of activities we're doing at METI, and also I'd like to ask the panelists a question.
経済産業省の方では、一昨年からスタートアップ育成5カ年計画ということで、スタートアップに対する投資額っていうのを5年で10倍に増やすというふうな施策を今取っております。
Since 2 years ago, the METI has implemented a plan called Startup Development 5-Year Plan. And over the 5-year period, we'd like to increase the investment in startup companies up to 10 trillion yen.
そんな中、私はですね、スタートアップの中でもディープテック分野と呼ばれるスタートアップを支援して、今、経済産業省の方では活動しております。
And my job is to support deep tech startups at METI.
そんな中、ちょっと皆さんにご質問したいなと思いますのが、日本のスタートアップエコシステムってこれからまだまだ発展していくというふうに言われていて、海外諸外国、シリコンバレーとかのエコシステムの形っていうのを真似することが多いんですけれども、反対にその日本の取り組み、例えばご存知でしたら政策だとかで、その海外で参考にされている事例ですとか、反対に海外から見てその日本のそのスタートアップエコシステム、およびスタートアップに関係する取り組み全般含めて、こういったものいいなと思われる部分ってありますでしょうか。途中で製造業に関してはですね、日本というのはいい分野、いいその土壌が整っているというお話もあったかと思いますけれども、その海外から見たその日本のスタートアップ政策およびその仕組みでいいなと思うところがあれば教えていただきたいなと思います。すみません、長いですけど。
And I'd like to ask the panelists a question. As we are seeing more and more evolution in the Japanese startup ecosystem, what would be the things from the overseas perspective that you find attractive or nice or excellent in terms of a governance policy or initiatives in startup ecosystem? In Japan, we tend to try to replicate what's going in overseas countries or Silicon Valley, but conversely, I'd like to know what kind of initiatives and activities could be or are actually now highly appreciated from the perspective of overseas country. And earlier in the panel discussion, I think some of the panelists mentioned that in the manufacturing sector, there's a good soil in the Japanese market. But from the overseas perspective, what would be a startup related policy or initiatives and activities that you may find attractive or excellent?
Thank you very much for the question. I think we have a good panel here to reply to this, taking from your global perspectives and looking into Japan, the attractiveness and some of the policies that you find positive.
I could go first with a quick one. Earlier today, I met with, because SKB.vc is still taking form, and we're currently in a sort of soft fund raising stage. So earlier today, I met with a government investor with a mission to support investors of strategic value to the Japanese startup ecosystem. The problem, though, is that the smallest amount of money they can invest into an investor is 10 times larger than what we actually need to get started. And I find this is quite common, that a lot of the investor support that is available, I think, is actually adapted and optimized for mid and later stage investors. So I'd like to see more support, and that might be direct investment support, which is optimized for seed stage, early stage investors. Because I think that's where the change has to start. That's where the global thinking has to start. It's hard to inject global DNA at a later stage. It has to be kind of there from the beginning.
Thank you. Maybe we can take one more comment on this question if anyone has.
It's good practice in Japan. Right. Can you think of any?
I can't really compare with the overseas environment in Japan, so I don't know.
I would like to see more grassroots level action also, and I'm trying to build that myself. I think it's really great. When I came to, I've been in Japan 10 years, and 10 years ago, the government's attitude to startups and compared to now is completely different. I want to thank you and everybody in the government to kind of opening doors and welcoming startups. And now it's just time for having that kind of actual builders and actual companies to make the next big global home runs. This is something that I have been very inspired in my native Finland.
Yeah, thank you. And let me just add on to Antti's words. I mean, we started Nordic Innovation House project here about 4 years ago, and we were very warmly welcomed by many of you in the audience. We have governmental officials, city politicians, we have large corporates and investors here sitting with us today. So I think it's really also the welcoming attitude to initiatives like ours coming from abroad to this country, and how we're being welcomed and how our thoughts are taken into account and how you're joining these kinds of venues. It would not be the same case in all around the world. So I would also agree with Antti on the attitudinal side as well. Thank you very much for the question. And lastly, for our town hall, we have one more member. So we have Ryusuke Komura. He is the executive director at Venture Cafe Tokyo. I've joined your Thursday gatherings many, many times. Thank you very much for keeping hosting that. I don't know how many hundreds you're already on. We would love to hear from your reflections on today. And what I think is always so great about the Venture Cafe events is that they are very diverse. You bring people from all around the world to one space in time. I would also like to maybe ask from you, since we touched about this equality issue here today, how do you take that also into account at Venture Cafe at the work that you do?
Right. Thank you very much. So again, I'm Ryusuke, and I think I don't have to explain about what I work on, what I'm working on. I think Nicholas has already explained, what I do. So, but I'm executive director of Venture Cafe, which is the U.S. corporation, non-profit corporation actually, from Boston. And then our mission is connecting innovators to make things happen, because we believe isolation is the enemy of innovation. So our signature activity is something called Thursday Gathering, as Nicholas mentioned. Every Thursday, because it's Thursday Gathering, we have a diverse kinds of people gathering and chatting, making connections, so that we believe we can accelerate your innovation. So that's what I do, or what we do. And reflection, right? So having heard the Sugimoto-san story, I understand I don't have to represent the whole Japanese society, but I cannot really articulate my feeling, but I felt kind of sorry, for that situation. But at the same time, and that reminded me of the really first day of Thursday Gathering. That was back in 2018. Essentially, we are the kind of organization bringing this a very flat, open innovation culture from North America, and particularly Boston. So we said, hey, this is networking. This is Thursday Gathering. We just started. But the very first Thursday Gathering was very interesting experience for me. Those guys wearing black suits just showed up, and they just started exchanging business cards, and then that's actually something that I didn't anticipate, But if you look at the, today's Thursday Gathering, it's completely changing, really I hardly see people wearing, actually we see people wearing black suits yet, but I have the frequency or the number of people wearing black suits is definitely decreased. And then we every Thursday we welcome really diverse kind of people, even high school students, pursuing to be a entrepreneur, changing the world. So so I see some hope there, definitely, as you said, the world is changing, that's what I felt. And then my question is particularly to Shintaro-san. These days, more and more, we have a number of visitors or startups or entrepreneurs who are aspiring to enter Japan's market. And then the frequent question that I encounter is something like, hey, how could we actually find could be successful in Japan's market? Because in the past, so many entrepreneur startups actually failed, to enter Japan's market. And to me, the really critical key, the point is finding a good talent, good community guide, like you mentioned, who can bridge your business and the market. But I think at the same time, it's really hard. So I just wanted to ask, is there any skills or techniques or points that maybe startups or those startups from foreign countries should take into consideration when they're trying to find a community? Yeah.
Well, I really don't. I really can't say there's one technique, but yes, but yes, it's probably very different from a foreign perspective. This country, how we do things still, and how people act. But if you really get into them, there are very a lot of people with open minds, even in the countryside, and we're having our engineers, foreign engineers, come to countryside of Yamaguchi, and then he's really now every day he's really on his own, going to local restaurants, izakayas, and where only locals are seated. But he's been very welcomed, and whenever I go visit the place, maybe once in 2 weeks, people I don't know would be speaking to me, telling me that, hey, Frank was here yesterday, and yeah, we took picture and stuff. So I think it's very much stereotype. There are stereotypes that, yeah, Japan is very closed or very difficult, different to, but if you really go into them, I think there's always a way to get into it. And so, I'm sorry, I'm not really speaking in terms of techniques, but yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Or these companies could also join Takeoff Tokyo and check the amazing talent that's available. But we are running out of time, so we will have to close the town hall and the panel here today. On my behalf, thank you very much for our panelists for joining the discussion here today, as well as our town hall participants. For the closing remarks, I would like to introduce to the stage Ambassador of Norway to Japan, Ambassador Iglum.
So thank you so much, Niklas, and thank you so much to the panelists. What a wonderful debate, and like we touched upon already, a very timely topic. I'm sure we could have continued several more hours, but unfortunately we are now here with the closing remarks. So Nordic Talks Japan has been a series of discussions and podcast episodes addressing global challenges. And through these conversations, our aim has been to create a space for contemplation and also to inspire action on sustainability issues in our everyday lives. And I think today's topic fits very well in with that description. How can we use innovation to save the world, or at least move in a more positive direction? But with today's event, we have actually reached our final event in this format of the Nordic Talks. So it is therefore my great honor, although a little bit bittersweet, I must say, to give some closing remarks and also to give out a lot of thanks to a lot of people who have done a big job. So first and foremost, a big thank you to the participants or the panelists for their very inspiring perspectives. Really great discussion. Also, we are very grateful to Nordic Innovation House, Niklas and his team, for their significant efforts over the past years in organizing this series of panel debates on crucial topics. Also, big thanks to the 5 Nordic embassies in Tokyo, including my own, for having taken on the organization of the debates, and also for engaging inspiring panelists. And of course, lastly, a big thanks to our audience who have joined us either in person or online on various events, and also tonight. We are running out of time, so I'm not going to try to summarize what we have heard tonight, but I think I can say that I take with me something very positive. I have confidence in a way in the future from listening to the 4 of you, and also including Niklas, the 5 of you. Antti, I hear that you have high hopes for the positive continued development in Tokyo and Japan when it comes to startups. And you also have some very positive experience in working with the younger generation, which I think is very important. You said that if you give them responsibility, they will grasp it and take it and show that what they're worth. So that was really very interesting. Also, Tobias, you have a very interesting experience. It has been very, very interesting to listen to you from the venture capital side of it all. Also very interesting to hear your experience from working outside Tokyo than in the regions of Japan, and also your soil, compost, gardener perspective. I also heard that you have high hopes. We need good seeds, and I think from the Nordic countries, we hope that some of those seeds can maybe come from our countries and then be paired up with some good capital in Japan and maybe continue to grow here in this country. And Amina, maybe not so positive what you told us, but I think unfortunately, I think we have a lot of the same experiences in the Nordic countries. I think Niklas already touched upon that when it comes to investors, that we need them also to see the women innovators. But good luck, just the fact that you are here and working on a very important topic like women's health with your company and with your companies. It's very inspiring. So I think we all wish you all the best. And Shintaro-san, your company, of course, also is a very good example of how innovation can really change the world. And of course, within the environmental sector, very, very important. So we wish you also all the best in your important work. So, and also I would like lastly to thank the Townhall participants. That was a little twist on how we usually do the Nordic Talks Japan. Thank you so much to Obata-san, Nishi-san, and Komura-san for valuable comments and contributions. And finally, a special thank from all of us to Moon Creative Lab for hosting this final Nordic Talk, or this final Nordic Talk in this round. So although this is the last Nordic Talk, it is certainly not the end of Nordic cooperation in Japan. We should maybe mention that later this month, on the 27th of June, we will kickstart Nordic collaboration at Expo 2025, where we will be represented with a joint Nordic pavilion. So I think I'm just ending by saying that we, the Nordics, we look forward to seeing you all in Osaka next year. And I'm sure that startups will definitely be a topic that we will have on the agenda in Osaka. So maybe we can say we continue the dialogue in Osaka 2025 next year. So see you all there. Thank you so much.